Hello there and welcome. When the news of the federal government's privatization of the power holding company in Nigeria, the PHCN, broke, it seemed the various unions in the power sector were not satisfied with the development, despite government's promise to revamp the sector in line with the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005. At the moment, 4,400 megawatts of electricity is being generated in the country, but analysts believe it can be improved upon, provided there is sufficient gas for the power stations. This week, we seek to find out how the sector has fared and the going-ons in the PHCN. Will join me in this interview with our guest, Professor Barth Nnaji, the Minister of Power, and the current chairman of the Presidential Taskforce on Power, an organ charged with the reform of the power sector. I'm Ayatunde Balogun, and this is Question Time. Professor Nnaji, welcome to Question Time.
Thank you.
Now, it's been a while since we last spoke. Of course, back then you were still the special advisor to the President on Power, but now you are the Honorable Minister of Power. So, first of all, let me congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
Now, let's begin straight away. The power sector as it is presently. Now, of course, you've made several promises, if I may put it that way, to ensure that power is made available to every Nigerian. Now, down the line, while you're serving or while you've been serving as the minister, how has it been so far? What have you been able to realize your vision?
Well, first of all, I've been serving as minister for about 6 months. But I must say that Nigerians can see improvement in power. We really have improved quantum. We've improved the stability. And it is due to the President's focus on ensuring that we leave no stone unturned to solve the power sector problem. We also will continue to do this. A number of power stations will be commissioned this year to support improvement in power.
So it sounds like we have a good picture on our hands in the coming days or weeks or maybe months. But of course, people will still argue that we're still experiencing several hitches of unstable power supply. I don't know how you would want to react to that.
Well, I react by saying that to build a power plant, it takes minimum 3 years to build a power plant. And so the fact that we are even, we've improved by just plugging some holes here and there to improve the existing installations is tremendous achievement, if we can say so ourselves. But before you can begin to talk about real improvement, new power plants must begin to come on stream, and they take a long time to build. So it's not something that somebody who has been in office for 6 months can say, yes, we should have landed at a point of reliability. We are growing. The only thing is that we won't slide back, and we won't just be marking time. We will continue to grow, and we will be growing fast. That's what we can promise Nigeria.
Where exactly do you think are we having challenges? Is it transmission, distribution, or the third one?
Well, in two key areas. Well, the sector is a complex one. Gas is one. Transmission is another. We are doing reasonably okay in transmission. There's a particular area where we have constraint in transmission, or one or two areas where we have constraint in transmission. But gas is a major challenge, because what happens is that if we don't have enough gas, then you can simply not fire the power plants.
I used to think that this issue of gas not being available would have been resolved quite a long time ago, but it's still staring us right in the face. So what do you think is responsible for this?
Well, some things need to be there in the system. You have to have appropriate tariff that will be able to pay for the gas that is supplied. And right now we are not able to actually pay for the gas that is supplied to the system. So it doesn't incentivize investors to go to invest in gas production. It takes, again, sometimes 2 to 3 years to begin to produce gas and build the infrastructure to transport the gas. All these things take time. This is why the sector has challenges. So there are things that we are doing now in the sector to ensure that the entire value chain is tightly coupled and that they are all performing, that they have the comfort, the various performers in them have the comfort to invest and expand and improve. And these things are being done as we speak.
All right, now the independent power project, which of course is one key area I'm sure the federal government is really committed to see that it really comes on stream now. What can you tell us about that? How far have we been able to go about it?
Oh, quite far. A lot of independent power producers we expect will begin to deliver starting from this year, later this year, those that have been working on theirs. And some will come next year, some will come the year after. So between now and 2014, 2015, we should expect about at least 5,000 megawatts coming from independents that will bolster the existing power supply in Nigeria. And that's actually the future. It's from independent power producers. From the existing power companies, what we expect is that through privatization, the installed capacities can be recovered and there can be expansion. For example, if you go to Geregu Power Station, it has 414 megawatts installed capacity. It's already been expanded, doubled in capacity, matter of fact. After that, it can still take more. Just the location and the infrastructure can still take more. Because what you have to have for, say, a gas-fired power plant is you need to have gas pipeline that will deliver enough gas for whatever quantum of power that you want, and then evacuation infrastructure for transmission. So once you have those two, you can just build up to the capacity of the asset. So this is what we have in a lot of locations.
Now, how about the state governments? Have you been able to partner with them? Because, of course, we know that it's not something that the federal government can just carry on its shoulders alone. There has to be some kind of watering down of responsibilities, if you put it that way.
In fact, just yesterday we had a very good discussion with the state governors on this issue, on how they would participate. Clearly, state governors or state governments will participate in power. Some may be able to undertake private generation from by their states. Some may just be part of a distribution company by taking equity position in a distribution company. What it does is that it allows a state government to grow as fast as it can. So assuming a distribution company isn't able to invest as fast as a state governor wants to go, the state governor can then undertake to do it, and it will operate almost like a loan basis, by providing loan to the distribution company. So these are areas where the state governments can participate, and we encourage their participation as much as possible.
So what's this issue of the PHCN probably not living up to its responsibility in terms of the way that the workers are being treated? Because, of course, the power sector reform, I'm sure, will have some stakes for the PHCN in terms of how it's going to be operating, and perhaps if it's going to be liquidated. Some people are putting it that way. Just want to put you in a lighter perspective.
The power sector reform is not about the workers. It's about improvement of power in Nigeria, and the workers happen to be part of it in the sense that they are instruments to improve. So as long as they are improving, then they would be working, whether it's for private sector or public sector, it doesn't really matter. They will be there, and what we want is for them to improve. The workers have not been trained in the last 15 years or so. And many of the people who are at the level of general managers or even AGMs and above may be the last bastion of those who have been properly trained in the system. So we want to restart the training program. We want for the workers to become more efficient. will want to eliminate death because of accidents that could just be not have to happen, etc. So the workers, they constitute part of the problem solving, but the reform is not about the workers. The reform is about the system.
Because every time we hear of the unions coming out to say, it's going to be some kind of a change, and workers will have to bear some sort of problems or challenges when these reforms take place, and nothing is going to be happening for them.
Plenty will be happening for workers. I will guarantee you that. Plenty will be happening positively. First, even if you look at a worker that is going to be severed from the system, the worker goes away with quite a lot of income from the severance. The worker gets to have a contract, temporary contract, during a period of transition. If that worker is a competent worker, that worker is not going to go away, because a new core investor, the group, will surely keep that worker. And that worker now has permanent employment. He has already taken severance, which is buying its service out, and it's now going to be employed permanently. So they stand to gain tremendously. And the new people would most likely improve on their income. That's just the way the business works.
When you say the new people, who are the new people?
The new people will be a co-investor. Let's say a distribution company will have a core investor that will take majority interest. Then the rest of it, like we may take 51% interest, 49% interest will remain with the states, with the federal government, states, and the workers themselves. The workers don't own any shares now. In the future, they will have a chance of having shares in the company that they work for, and that is improvement. So they were kind of working for themselves.
So it doesn't mean that the PHCN was going to be kicked aside or rolled off by the federal government?
PHCN is a name. It's a name.
Yes, formerly known as NEPA.
Formerly known as NEPA, formerly known as PHCN. That the PHCN it has already transited to 18 successor companies, and that's something for some people in the union had been difficult to appreciate, that there are 18 successor companies, and that when you say that somebody is a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, that person actually is the absolute person in charge of that particular company and reports to the owner of the company, in this case the federal government. That is just the way it is structured. So it's unbundled. And the sooner some people who still have difficulty understand that, the better. Like today, we were able to make progress in understanding that concept, that you do have 18 successor companies, and that each company has a role in the industry. It may be that it is a co-distribution company delivering electricity on retail basis to a co-consumers. If it's Ikeja, the same thing. If it's Abuja, the same thing to the Abuja electricity zone, and so on. These are companies. Transmission Company of Nigeria is responsible for grid electricity supply to the nation. That is its function. It's not one monolith that used to exist, one single company that used to exist before.
All right, I still want to go back to this issue of the three areas. That's the generation, the transmission, and the distribution. But of course, I'm very sure that the problem that we normally face, or the challenge, has to do with generation, which I also believe you also have been speaking about at several places where you go, that really needs to be looked into. But how would you say we fared so far in terms of that?
We are doing better in generation. Actually, we have improved by almost 40% in generation since we started, since President Jonathan came on board. And that's a lot in power to have improved that much. What we want is to leapfrog as quickly as possible to a point of reliability. We believe that we can do it with all the things that we are doing. What we recognize is that reform is difficult in any place. People resist. There are all kinds of resistances for one reason or another. But in this country, we people understand that you have to have electricity, and we're making tremendous progress in getting there. So we have made progress, and we are making very good progress. Generation-wise, I anticipate that in no time we will reach a point of what we call willing buyer, willing seller. This is the point where the telephone industry is. You do not need to go to stand in line or pay anybody bribe to get your SIM card or whatever. We like for people to get to the point where you come home, you take electricity for granted, you flip your switch, and your light will come on. It's not a big deal anymore. So this is surely going to happen very soon with the quantum of generation that is being added as we're working.
So the National Electricity Regulatory Commission, that's the NRC. I know that's one area, or that's one agency that the Power Ministry is also working closely with in ensuring that its mandates or achieves its mandate of regulating the industry. But it does appear to me that more can still be achieved in that area. What would you say to that?
No, I think the Regulatory Commission is doing okay. You have to recognize that at some point they were suspended. That this is the sort of thing that happened in this country. The one thing this president wants to do is to have consistency in policy, so you don't go forward and take one step forward and take two steps backwards. The Regulatory Commission had been reinstated back to its normal role and given a higher degree of autonomy, independence to operate as it should, according to law. So they are doing well. And there are things they're supposed to do, generate a number of codes that govern the network. They are supposed to develop tariff, and they are doing that. They have to have a way to show people clarity in what the rate they pay for will be in electricity going forward, year on year. And they're doing all these things.
All right. How about the issue of the way that the electricity or the electric power sector reform is going? Of course, it was done in 2005. That's the Power Reform Act, and it's been a long wait for that to come up. It has come up, but can we still achieve something bigger and better in terms of that reform?
Well, it is the reform that's driving everything that we're doing. We're simply following the law, the act. And that act it led to the electricity power roadmap, which the president launched in August of 2010. And that roadmap is what we are now following. So that roadmap surely will deliver. And if you have been observing the sector, you will notice that there is tremendous support across the world for it. For example, the US Exim, the chairman of US Exim came here and pledged to support the power sector alone with $1.5 billion.
And that's a lot of money.
Yes. In 2010, the total amount of money that they loaned in sub-Saharan Africa was 1.4 billion. It's the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. Then they come to Nigeria, and just for power sector alone, they pledged to invest $1.5 billion. That is a lot. So we feel that we're doing things correctly, and that investment can come from within and from outside the country.
All right. How about the issue of the casual workers in the PHCN? Because I know that is another area that you are also looking at. Because if we look at it, it does appear that we have so many of them, and it's perhaps not helping the cause of the PHCN in performing its functions. How have you been able to tackle this?
The managers of PHCN, that's the CEOs, they say that a lot of the casual workers are quite helpful, which is why they hired them. So, because there had been no training, the difference between somebody who was hired on a permanent basis, say in 2005, and someone who was hired casually in 2005 might be minimal, just in terms of appendage of whether you're permanent or not. So what we are doing is to convert all those that had been hired prior to 2009 to permanent status. We don't want to go quibbling with the union over this matter. Let's just convert them to permanent, and then when a co-investor comes, he can determine whether this worker is correct for the function that performs or not.
Now let's look at the area of rural electrification in terms of how people in the rural areas also, of course, do get access to electricity, because we can't run away from the fact that they also need electricity, at least to further their local businesses and all whatnot. But how have you been able to address that? I understand there's an agency looking into that. How far have you gone?
There is the Rural Electrification Agency, REA. The REA was suspended by the Yar'Adua government, and I think it was just not quite fully. First of all, there's it's people there committed some things. They did some things, and so a lot of them were.
Do you want to?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't, because they have cases in court, and I wouldn't get into it. So those people were suspended, a whole horde of them. And the entire agency, in fact, was really suspended, and they wanted to scrap the entire agency. But it's a very useful agency, because that's how the rural communities get access to electricity. And so it is the case of throwing away the baby with the bathwater. So what the president has done now is to reactivate the agency. We now have an appointment of a new managing director, and we will recreate the agency and get it to work. About 1,600 abandoned projects will now be completed, and these are things that we want to see happen with REA.
Whenever with this issue of abandoned projects come up, you begin to wonder where actually is the problem coming from, because you can imagine if all those projects had been done a long time before now, maybe things would have been better.
That's true. Actually, abandoned project was just a matter of a certain way of people in government doing projects. Prior to now, what a minister would do is he would look at projects started by a previous minister, or a head of an agency will look at projects started by a previous agency head, and say, well, these people, let me start my own. Let me leave these ones and start my own. The president has said, we will not do that anymore. Every project, you must in fact show the pathway to completion. So there must be funding available from government or from government and private to show that that project will be completed. You cannot just start a project anymore and abandon the project halfway. And which is why, unlike previous governments, we now have in our budget money to complete all these projects in REA. They were started by some other people, but we have to complete them.
The lawmakers come into the fore. We have series of probes here and there and all whatnot. But what's the relationship like with the National Assembly?
We have a very good relationship with the Senate and the House, and it comes from the fact that when I was appointed, I wrote to the Senate President, wrote to the Chairman of House Committee on Power, Chairman of Senate Committee on Power, that we want to come to brief the National Assembly. And so we actually went to seek them out, to educate them on what it is that we're doing, so that we would begin to have dialogue. And in fact, when we had a power summit in what we call in-house power summit with the CEOs of all the companies in the country. We invited them, and some of them came. That's the sort of relationship that we have. We had a retreat last weekend, and they also came. There were some senators that came for the 2 days that we had the retreat. So these are ways that we are relating. And so when we now go to talk about our issues, we believe they understand better than it would have been.
So the issue of vices such as corruption and the rest of it, have you been able to put that in check?
Oh, we're doing a lot to correct that. I believe that checking such a thing starts from the top. And so as long as I remain, bring integrity to bear on the sector, and I compel the people that I interact with there to do something, that it's improving. They know that I don't take any kinds of nonsense on such things. So if we find you, we are going to take care of you. We won't take time.
The masses, which I must say should be the fulcrum or the main reason why government should provide basic amenities for the people, housing, healthcare, electricity. Now, what major plans do you have for them? Like, the not too wealthy, that common man on the street, to make him believe that yes, for someone who just wants to get his life going, set up a small business, and knowing fully well that he will have access to uninterrupted power supply.
Electricity is special amongst services. It's almost a right of citizens. I mean, I don't mean a right that you get it free, but it's a right to be had, that you should have it. So that's how we look at it. And therefore,
it can't be made free.
It cannot be made free, but it can be made near. You can deliver it to the urban poor and rural dwellers at a price that wouldn't break them, that they wouldn't notice that they're actually paying for electricity. I mean, it's not such big consequence to them. And that's how the tariff is. Because the lowest tariff, that is the urban poor and rural dwellers, is almost 1/8. It's almost 1/8 of the price of the biggest residential customer amongst residential customers. So it's quite a reduction. So not everybody pays the same price at all, and it's in electricity. But in your phone, it's a little different. I mean, you still have volume consumption in a phone, but in electricity, it is you have to provide electricity to that person who has 4 light bulbs, doesn't have big air conditioners, at a much more reduced rate. And we're even going to do more by introducing energy-saving devices, like energy bulbs. We're going to do that. We distribute these things to the distribution company CEOs, and they send to these consumers to further reduce their tariff.
Now let's look at it even on a bigger picture. Talking about industrialization. Now we know that Nigeria over the years has had to grapple with industries, winding up and having problems, all because they complain of inadequate power supply. They have practically you have to run your own power supply by yourself. If you're a big company or an industry, but how can this be resolved? How can the federal government ensure that that is corrected in the nearest possible time?
That is being able to have more power for industries. By the leapfrogging effect that we want to achieve in power supply, first, by getting the distribution companies to become more efficient so that they're able to take more power and in an efficient manner, by having more generation coming in, the stages of generation that we have, so that we're targeting that by year 2020 we should be getting close, if not at 40,000 megawatts, so that industries of all types will be able to grow in Nigeria and sustain.
Do you think 40,000 megawatts will be sufficient?
We don't know. Okay, whether we can say that 40,000 megawatts will be absolutely sufficient.
Looking at the size of the population, it's massive, 160 million.
No, I'm looking at Vision 2020. 40,000 megawatts is what Vision 2020 says, but it could be 50,000 megawatts. It's actually not a trivial issue to say that you're going to grow power in that way, because what you're talking about is to grow power at the rate of about 4,000 megawatts per year, roughly, to get to that point. And you know where we are now in terms of power. But even to talk about sufficiency, the projection by McKinsey is that by year 2030, we should be talking about 135,000 megawatts. It's reasonable. And all that is required is to put Nigeria on a path of no return in power generation. That's what this government wants to do, to put Nigeria on a path of no return, so that it's not reversible. To now suddenly begin to talk about government being the sole provider of electricity, thereby getting people back to the problem that we've always had.
So in other words, the government was really trying to look for ways of not having to handle all aspects of electricity supply.
Yeah, government can never do it. It doesn't have capacity. Because our government, we're a poor country, and we have to admit that we are.
Poor country?
Yes, we are.
Why do you say that?
Well, you just have to look at indices in comparison to other countries, and you will see that we are a poor country. We don't believe that we are, but we are. Don't mind that some people at a certain level live super well, but the vast population of Nigerians don't live that way. Okay, so and so you have to also look at the GDP, the income per capita. So income per capita in Nigeria is below $2,000. When you look at some countries that are mid-level countries, they may have reached $5,000, and in some cases up to $10,000. That's what we're talking about, because that's what wealth creation is about. And the economy has to be able to generate such income, and it comes from energy is a driver of that. That is power. You need to have power to drive the industries. We are a single product economy, and that product doesn't employ too many people. The number of people that you know that work for oil companies are not that many. So you need to create many more industries. Manufacturing should now become so instead of oil being the contributor of 95% of our external income, manufacturing should contribute, say, 30% of such. Agriculture should contribute, and not just merely raw products of agriculture, but agro-allied products, or products, value-added products from agriculture. That's what we're talking about. You have to look at your stock exchange. I mean, which industries are in the stock exchange? What kind of divisions? To compare the stock exchange with stock exchange in some developing emerging economies or developed economies, then you see what I'm talking about. In Germany, which is a fully developed economy, automobiles constitute one product, right? But you have Volkswagen, you have Mercedes-Benz, you have BMW, and so on and so forth. All of them constitute one product. just like oil. It's one product for us. And then you still have pharmaceuticals. You have heavy machinery. You have toys. In some countries, just toys alone contribute billions of dollars. That's what we're talking about. So we just are not there at all. And we need to get serious, and we need to get grounded in what must be done and take bold steps to achieve what needs to be done.
All right, now we're actually running out of time, but of course, as we begin the year in earnest, 2012, what would you like to say to Nigerians, particularly the ordinary Nigerian, if you might put it that way? Because a whole lot is expected, whether we like it or not. If you ask most people, they'll tell you the main thing, or one of the main things they want government to do, or to ensure that is being done, is the effectiveness of power generation or electricity as it is, so that things can move. You know, the much needed investment we're talking about can come in and whatnot. Businesses can thrive and the rest of it.
Well, I like to tell Nigerians to have belief that this is going to happen. We recognize that previous governments have come and said stuff and didn't achieve. But this government actually has a roadmap which has been heralded by various people around the world as a credible roadmap to achieving success. And we're proving it out by the sort of gains that we're showing. Because that roadmap says it has short-term achievements, it has long-term achievements. And we're following the path. We can't say that a roadmap is a roadmap, so you may not be achieving 100%, which is what a roadmap is supposed to be. But if you are achieving even 80% on the roadmap, then you're doing well. And in a lot of areas of the roadmap, we're achieving more than that. So we're making progress. The fact that you have in a lot of places stable electricity, that is, when you have electricity, it's actually stable. People have forgotten that it used not to be so, that you have the epilepsy of electricity, which is you talk about Nigeria as having epileptic electricity supply. But because now it is stable, we forget that it used to be so. People who used to get maybe 2 hours, sometimes nothing, you come home, you just take it for granted you won't have electricity. Some are getting 12 hours, some are getting 18 hours. Some people even have 2 days supply, no interruption. And we forget. And it's sometimes people have a reaction like, oh, something may be wrong here. We have had this electricity for a couple of days and nothing has happened. Somebody was called and somebody was saying, maybe you people should check the electric system. It has been on for two days.
Perhaps someone had just forgot to turn off.
Yes, the transformers may blow up and something may just happen. So please check it. Which means the person doesn't realize that the electricity industry is working well, is beginning to work well.
But how about the issue of transformers? Are we are we going to be getting more transformers coming in soon?
You have transformers in, but you don't have enough yet. You don't have enough of this. It is about investment. This is what we are talking about, investment in distribution companies. So right now, you have to ask these chief executive officers to give you, and it's almost like you're begging them to give you. In time, you won't have to beg them. They will come actually to replace. They will see that this transformer is overloaded, they need to do something about it, and they give you a bigger one, or they just give you add another one or something. They will begin. It will happen more like your telephone now. That's what is happening. People, maybe you are too young from the time when people used to pay bribe and queue online to get a line. But now people beg you to sell you a line. It will happen here.
All right, Honourable Minister, with you, thank you very much for appreciating the time to spend with us on Question Time. And we do pray that things will get better in the power sector.
Thank you, Ayo.
Thank you very much, sir. We all agree that the challenges facing the power sector are indeed enormous. Now, some even say it is a very problematic infrastructure sector in Nigeria, primarily served by a poor-performing state monopoly, But our guest believes in no time appreciable impact will be felt in the building of more independent power projects, and the privatization of the PHCN, when fully complete, will also lift the quality of life of Nigerians. He also makes it clear that the redeployment of workers at the PHCN headquarters to its successor companies throughout the country is in line with the Reform Act of 2005 to achieve efficiency and effectiveness. For now, the PHCN still exists, but its liquidation, like he says, will be by a court order in the near future. We'll be waiting to see all of that materialize as the days go by. Remember, I told you earlier in the course before the interview that 4,400 megawatts is being generated. Well, the minister has promised that this year an additional 1,000 megawatts, which is the target of government, will also be achieved. We'll also be watching on how that plays out in the coming months ahead. Well, that's our package for this week. We certainly hope you've enjoyed it. Well, do remember to send us your questions, comments and suggestions on questiontime@channelstv.com or watch us online via channelstv.com. I remain Ayatunde Balogun. Till we come your way again next week, is bye for now.